What is good, G's? It's your main man, Toku Rider Go, here with it again. When it comes to Toku, there are obviously the big hits and the big fuck-ups that everyone makes fun of. And today we're going to be looking at the ones that aren't considered the most favorable to watch by the community. Bear in mind, this is not reflective of my own views on any of these shows. I will not say if I like or hate any of these. The time for my own opinion on tons of shows will come when the time comes. But this video is simply just me picking out some of the most hated on Tokusatsu shows. And then I'll point out common complaints just to give you some insight as to why they're ranked so low. And of course, you should always watch all of these shows just to see what your own opinion is. Everyone get the memo? Okay, let's dive in. Starting off with the Super Sentai show, Ninninger is often considered to be the most infamous had it not been for one other show, which we'll see at the very end. But yeah, I do see a few people actually happening to like this show, liking the more lighthearted tone of it. However, most people are quite bothered by this show. There's a couple of things that cause that. First off, ninjas are a beloved and repeated theme of Super Sentai. It's one of those themes that you can repeat every so often. People really liked it when it came to Kaku Ranger and Hurricaneer, so many were hyped for this season. But when it came around to it, people just did not like the design of the suits, mecha, weapon, etc. Most also complain about the villains and plots being kind of dry in comparison to the surrounding Sentai. But by far the biggest criticism is the team's red known as Takaharu or Ninninger. Anyone who watched the show knows that Takaharu is very up in your face and enthusiastic. The majority of people found that very annoying, especially the catchphrase. On top of that, many complain about this show being red-centric, which only emphasizes the fact that people don't like him even more because there's no other characters to really distract you. I mean, people do like Star Ninja, but it definitely wasn't enough for them because they still hate it. The biggest upside is most people seem to actually really like things like the suits and the concepts and the action scenes. On top of that, people also feel rather positively about characters like Makoto and Alien, aka Kamen Rider Spectre and Kamen Rider Necrom. The thing that takes it away for most people is that they feel the main character, Takaru or Kamen Rider Ghost, is kind of boring. On top of that, the episodes didn't really catch anyone's hearts, and the story got kind of messy to the point where the already boring character Takaru couldn't properly develop. It also only put a sour taste into people's mouths that it aired alongside Ninninger for a little bit, and it was the only Kamen Rider in its time frame to actually have 50 whole episodes. This has probably become the most forgiven show on here, but boy oh boy, when it first came out, it was hated like shit. Again, starting with upsides, Tsukasa and Daiki caused Kamen Rider Decade to be pretty well loved when it comes to legacy tributes. People like these characters. Aside from that though, people really do not like the new Yusuke, feeling like he's kind of an insult to the original Godai Yusuke. The tributes that it got also really disappointed some people who expected it to be something like Gokaiger, which it wasn't. It was more of a reinvention process. When an actual story started to take place, it was even worse for many people. It started to get kind of confusing when they started to go into Showa worlds and have this die shocker thing, and then we get to the ending, which didn't happen, straight up. It was only 32 episodes long, and the ending movie that was supposed to happen just got cancelled. So we were left on possibly the biggest cliffhanger in all of Kamen Rider history. Unlike any other show that's here, this is probably the most universal thing. People like to have a feeling of closure when it comes to a TV show. And all of this together hurt Kamen Rider Decade's reputation. Quick disclaimer, this does not include Ultraman GINGA S, as many people feel like that was actually an improvement over the original show. Anyways, the main problem people have with it is that it was actually pretty big of a connecting point for the Ultraman lore, which is a lot bigger than the Kamen Rider or Super Sentai or any other Toku lore. Now that's not the bad part. The bad part is that it's a teenage drama. Many Ultra fans did not see this as something favorable for this show. It meant that it did not have a defense team or an overall sense of heroism compared to many other shows. Its characters and placement into the general story also kind of suffer because of this. It was also the first Ultraman show in a while, and all the shows that had come before it, including Mebius, Tiga, Dyna, Gaia, were all considered pretty good, so this was the first show to make the clean reputation of Ultraman kind of dirty. Yeah, this show is seen as pretty bad by most people. Everyone does agree that this is probably the most circumstantial season to hate on because of the fact that it was actually supposed to be much different from how it turned out. This was supposed to be a serious season, and it started off that way until a real-life Tokyo massacre happened and a rewriting process was gone through. And this essentially turned Ohranger into a comedy season, which did not fit what it was supposed to be well. Essentially, the characters trying to be all funny just did not come out well for what they were supposed to be as characters originally, and what was supposed to be serious in terms of threats and story and episodes monsters are just so forcibly silly to most people. A lot of it was rushed due to rewriting which was happening simultaneously as it was airing, and overall, even though people liked the beginning episodes because they retained the darkness tone, everything culminated together for a show seen as unfunny and not very good with its ending. So to start off, while people don't love this aspect, they at least borderline like the magic and early Heisei-esque part of the show. So overall, nothing special, but the writer side of the show seen as pretty good. And a lot of people love Wizard's designs, considering it to be one of the best in Kamen Rider. Then we have Haruto, which is controversial. Some people see him as boring, some people see him as interesting and unique. People also seem to like Kosuke. But then we get into what people see as bad, which is mostly the villains, the threats, and the supporting characters. And most people say the story was mediocre to not good and culminated in a pretty bad ending. People feel pretty strongly about avoiding this one, but in contrast, it seems more forgotten than hated compared to Ghost and Decade. To finish things off, we have basically the most hated Toku show of all time in Power Rangers Megaforce/Super Megaforce. The complaints are essentially that this wasn't a show that was even written. There was no characters, story, villains, tone, you name it. It was just episodes being ripped out of Gokaiger and Goseiger and being washed down with cringe. This was seen as a show by everyone that was essentially written for preschoolers, which to be fair it probably was, but people do not like that. And those are essentially the most hated Toku shows. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, you should give every single one, even Megaforce, a chance before you rate it and see where your own opinion actually fits into the equation. And aside from that, I can safely and thankfully say that more Toku shows are seen as good than bad. So it's important to remember there's good and bad and good.